Thank you very much, and thank you for that introduction. Yes, it is really important to consider the next generations and organizational creation of value over the longer term. In the ISO 37000 standards, that's the governance of organization standard, we've coined the term value generation, really just to reflect that it's not just creation we need to watch out for, it's erosion and preservation of value. So thank you very much, and I'm sorry, yes, I did not have my mute button on, but I am here now, which is great, and thank you for accommodating me. We have got half an hour. I'm not going to go into technicalities, but I do want to just start off by saying that we've got the standards now. They are still very new to all of us. We are not impacted by just the whatever standards South Africa adopts. To do any work in any other jurisdiction, we're going to be asked as South African organizations to respond to those requirements as well. So we see the CSRD out of the Europe, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, and specifically their ESRS, European Reporting Sustainability Reporting Standard, E1, which speaks on climate. And that speaks to what we heard about today and what Ndidi was telling us in the launch, the keynote yesterday around the IFRS S2, which is focusing on climate. But what we do know is that we really don't have the time. The experts don't have enough time available to them to satisfy all of the demands on them. We don't have time to respond in terms of the capacity available in an organization to try and meet such an important compliance requirement as sustainability reporting. For some of us, this is entirely new, certainly the SME sector. For the listed sector, this is not new, but it does bring some new requirements. So really, time is of the essence. And what we have today are international sustainability development goals, but we also have international agreements around climate. Those targets have been pulled down into national targets, and now we have to have organizational responses to it. I know that people have said that businesses are really enabling this change, but yes, it is. From an economic perspective, the investors are very concerned about the long-term prospects of their investments, which has led us as business to respond with having a more long-term perspective. But in getting to that change of perspective, we don't have a lot of time in which to do it. We know that the scientific numbers are saying, the global warming numbers, we way over 1.5. So as one of the chairs of Anglo American said, your decision making on a day-to-day basis in an organization is, do you want to drown, or do you want to fry or boil? So really, we do need to incorporate these decisions in every single these constructs and this context in every one of the decisions we make. How can we make those decisions if we don't have the information? How can we make the best out of a bad situation? And really, we need time to think, time to get in place what we need, and we need to have time in order to get better and improve. And we know that we've had that time with financial reporting. We don't have the same number of years available to us. One of the previous speakers from Ghana spoke about the dearth of capacity and the dearth of expertise. And certainly, I must add, there is a dearth of time. We just don't have the time available to us. What we also see is that this environment is incredibly fluid. So if we add in the fact that things are changing under our feet day by day, and we don't have the time to dance the jig that we needing to dance, what we do need to make sure is that we're not focusing on vaporware, on wishy-washy, that businesses themselves need to pick up on focused updates, the important stuff, not the fear-mongering news that is out there, not the controversial ESG is dead. We need focused updates on how to do this and how to move forward to long-term resilience and sustainability. That dearth of expertise is a real issue for organizations around the world, not only in South Africa. Certainly South Africa is very fortunate to be ahead of the curve, since we've had the GRI mandated in 2002 on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. In fact, through Professor Mervyn King, it was the first stock exchange in the world to mandate GRI reporting. So we have more expertise in South Africa than is really available around the rest of the world, because we've had a little bit more history than the rest of the world. But 21 years for a full discipline to develop is far too maybe we have a little bit more expertise in the 40 years, but certainly we weren't focusing on it. It wasn't something that needed to be done in our education systems. So that expertise, the depth of expertise, the wisdom over years of having tried and tested various scenarios and ways of doing things is just not available to us today. So the best way of finding that expertise and developing it quickly is by networking. And sure, our consultants, why we turn to consultants and the consulting organizations is because generally they do have that depth of expertise, because they're going from one company to the next. So they're getting that expertise really rapidly. We don't have the time from the people inside the organization, employed by the organization, having gone from one organization to the next to get that experience and wisdom to develop it. So the only way we have available to us today is for all roles in an organization to be involved in events such as this, to watch webinars, but being circumspect on what webinars you're joining, because you don't have a lot of time. But importantly, for the leaderships themselves to actually have time to network with other leaders. And that is extremely important, to develop that understanding of what all the different companies are doing. And we need that networking environment being presented to us in such a way that we're not having to reveal any competitive advantage. So the things like looking at case studies, what others have done, is very important, because then it's not exactly what we have done that we're disclosing, but essentially what others have done and their willingness to disclose that story to us. And then the discussion around the networking tables is really, really important to develop our expertise. The last problem that we're facing today is the one of education. I just look back on my childhood in primary school. I think the best we did was the water cycle, and it came through in one test in standard 4. I think that's grade 6 now. And from there onwards, there wasn't a lot of understanding. I mean, certainly when I was doing, the science subjects, my science teacher told me that the world is an open system. What is an example of an open system? Well, it's the Earth, planet Earth. And what we're facing today is that understanding is completely incorrect. We are a closed system. Once we've polluted more carbon in the atmosphere than we used to have, it's closed, so it's going to stay there until we do something about it. So that's the kind of education that, and maybe I'm a bit older and there's better education now, that we're trying to rely on, that we're standing on. It has a tremendous parallel with information technology and IT advancements, is where are we now and what do we do now? Because the generations in the leadership teams are not really able to rely on the expertise and education that they had in the past, because it wasn't there. So let's have a look at education for capacitation. That is really what we're needing now, is we're needing to educate people in the fundamentals, but also the continually in changing fluid environment. So we have what we need. I often talk about repurposing your kitchen. Organizations all have a kitchen. That kitchen is for financial information, for transactional information. We need to repurpose our kitchen now for sustainability information. We have an organization that's been eating our meals that have come out of our kitchen, the management information reports, business intelligence, financial and transactional information. Now we need to capacitate our organizations to consume this sustainability information, to be able to really get their hands around it, to determine the risks associated with what's coming through, as well as the opportunities. So those are the big 4 factors that are facing us today. Not really understanding what the future brings, but having a good understanding through a good idea from today's and the last 2 days conference days that Belinda has put together for us, and SIPSI is hosting for us. So it might be fluid. We need continual updates. Those continual updates need to be very pointed, not that we can just read the news every day. We don't have to fall back on. We do have what it takes. We just don't have the specific subject matter at hand. So we're looking at a specific subject and capacitating our organizations around that subject. So what we've done in Chapter 0 Southern Africa is we have established an organization, it's a voluntary association that leverages off the World Economic Forum's 8 governance principles. So it's developed a program, an ongoing, continuous program of 4 governing bodies. The 8 governance principles are underpinning everything we do in Chapter 0 Southern Africa. The World Economic Forum collaborated with Cambridge University to create the Climate Governance Initiative. The Climate Governance Initiative was to essentially enable or mobilize those 8 climate governance principles. And the decision was to mobilize through chapters, through a network of associations around the world. Of course, in South Africa, we had to be different. And to be different, we said we're actually a positively producing countries. We're not like the European countries where it's really net consumer countries. So we need to take a different perspective. First of all, we can't have one chapter per country. We have taken a regional perspective. So the 16 SADC countries is our network of governing body members. We are helping West Africa and Eastern Africa establish their chapters. But again, we have an issue of affordability and resource and capacity constraints. So regional chapters. The second difference that we've have agreement with the Climate Governance Initiative on is that we can't just be for non-executive directors. And that is the mandate from the CGI, is non-executive directors. In South Africa, we rely on the King reports. You heard from Ansi earlier. So Ansi Romano spoke to us about governing body members. It's the whole board that needs to come on board. We can't have one governing body member going in one direction saying, look, I know all about the sustainability side of things, with none of the other directors really having the expertise to be their children to work the phone for them, right? Which we do in IT. So we needed to have a more comprehensive view of all governing body members being involved in understanding and being capacitated in the area of climate. But that's the third point I'd like to focus on. We're certainly regional. It's governing body members as opposed to only non-executive directors. But we can't be only carbon focused or greenhouse gas emissions focused. We have to think about, as we were saying earlier, the environment, but also society and our social imperatives. So in Chapter 0 Southern Africa, we're equipping governing body members with the whole sustainability matters, starting off with climate, but with a view for just transition. We have a brilliant framework that we need to mobilize now in Southern Africa, and we have the climate bill coming through. So we'll have the infrastructure shortly, and we need to mobilize on top of that. People ask me, why do we need to produce this sustainability information as organizations? And really, I think the fundamental premise is that we need to do this, yes, for our long-term sustainability and resilience as an organization, but to be able to respond to those scientific targets. I'm going to circle back to the first page that I had up there. Our response as business needs to say, those are your targets. This is how I can as a business effectively respond to those targets. Right now, we don't have the information available to us to be able to respond effectively. So essentially, without that information, business doesn't have a voice. When government says you need to reduce your carbon emissions, or we need to roll out 120,000 electric vehicles in the next so many years, we don't have a response to say, well, as business, we only have the capacity for this, because we don't have that information at our fingertips. So not only is it important for our networking and capacitation perspective, but we also need to have that information to be able to respond to all of our stakeholders, including our country as a stakeholder, the national response. So please join us if you're a governing body member. We have one educational event per month, according to those 8 climate governance principles. It is free to attend. The events will be hosted in person, but also available online. We are going to be going through resource dependent to the 16 countries around the SADC region to onboard the countries for this. And we are already starting our discussions in the various countries. There is our website, Chapter 0, Southern Africa. It's a long one, I know. Watch for your spelling. So Chapter 0, southernafrica.org. We welcome anyone to please join us, any governing body member. We are extending it to corporates. As I spoke earlier, a holistic approach to corporates is really important. So we are extending it to corporates, and there is a fee associated with that. Mark Kaplan is in the audience, and Mark will be able to tell you more. But let me go into the ESG exchange. So the ESG exchange is specifically responding to those issues that were raised by from the Ghanaian presenter. So first of all, we need to get all organizations rallied around helping corporates, helping organizations, business to respond. So we heard from the NBI providing us with really clear guidance, Alex from the NBI providing us with guidance in terms of what needs to be done, and if we don't do this, what could happen to us, what we need to be responding to. So we've, at the ESG Exchange, which is an initiative of Professor Mervyn King's Good Governance Academy, we've pulled together all of the international players that you can see on the left-hand side there, and we've created an advisory committee of the willing. Essentially, those organizations that are willing to provide expertise to organizations free of charge. We have those organizations then have appointed experts and other experts from around the world to participate in the technical committee. The technical committee are, again, a coalition of the willing, providing their expertise into structured how-to playbooks. These how-to playbooks is essentially a journey through content that already exists. That content is provided and pointed out to us and curated by the experts into a structured framework. So that content is forever changing, and we need to make sure that we have that fluidity, the agility, the flexibility in these how-to playbooks. The how-to playbooks read as globally applicable principles, just like the King Report does. It will be globally applicable like ISO 37000, but it will also be nationally applicable like the King Report. There, if you want to have a look at more, and here's another one, the esgexchange.org. You can go and have a look and click on the About page. If you are a technical expert, we really welcome, instead of recycling your plastic and trying to do your best from that perspective, and not instead, maybe in addition to, you can volunteer to participate in providing your expertise and making it accessible globally. So this is one of the sources that Chapter 0 Southern Africa uses in providing its educational events. Other thought partner networks include the advisory firms, the various providers of information such as NBI and others. So what is the next generation approach? If that help is available to us, because I didn't want to go into the actual reporting standards, you are aware of that, but as the next generation, for us to be considering the next generation and long-term value creation and not erosion or degradation, what do we need to think about? The first thing we need to think about is the JEEP principle. So I'm not sure if everyone in the audience understands what JEEP stands for. You know, in the World War II, that vehicle, the American vehicle that bounces around, the JEEP principle is they needed a vehicle to get around in the war situation with just enough essential parts. And that's where the JEEP acronym comes from. It has just enough essential parts. And really, in moving forward in our reporting, we need to start. We don't need to start with our best foot forward, because we know that our best foot forward is really problematic. We don't have all the data we need. We don't have all of the systems and processes in place, but we do need to put a foot forward. So what we're showing and seeing in the next generation approach to the sustainability reporting is that our first step is with just enough essential parts in it, just enough to start the process. And then we need to have a well-baked-in process of continual improvement. How do we get there? We get there through collaboration, as we've seen on the ESG exchange, is global collaboration. And we're seeing now through Chapter 0 Southern Africa is organizations and governing bodies members getting together, not to make another buck, but really to collaborate in solving this problem together. It's fundamental, and it is a next generation approach. I do see many organizations and even young people battling with the concept of collaboration over shareholder value creation or shareholder dividends, financial rewards. So really looking at a collaborative, holistic approach. If we're going to do the JEEP process and we're going to crowdsource information through collaboration, isn't that going to land us into difficulties with greenwashing? And how are we going to make sure that our information really is accurate and verifiable? So I'm not sure if you're aware, but the International Audit and Assurance Standards Board, the IAASB, has recently released their sustainability assurance standards. They've taken exactly this approach, which is a next generation approach, by releasing a JEEP model to say this isn't ideal, this isn't the gold standard, this is essentially our best, understanding that our best is found wanting, our best foot forward. And so those are standards that we can have a look at to verify the information
Carolynn,
that we're providing.
Please wrap up in 2 minutes.
Yes, I see my clock. Thank you so much. And this is my last slide. So making sure that we are not called out for greenwashing, which in financial terms is essentially fraud. We need to have some level of assurance that what we're putting out there is accurate and has integrity. So yes, don't try and satisfy everything in your first stab at it. JEEP is the principle that we need to follow. Crowdsource, see what others are doing, collaborate with others in terms of putting that your foot forward, and then using and leveraging these standards which haven't yet been published as final standards. Of course, continual improvement using the ISO management system standard, establish your mandate and commitment in the organization, plan what you need to do it, check that you're doing it according to the plan, and then setting improvement targets for your continual improvement. The last point I want to make is around stakeholder engagement. Value is in the eyes of stakeholders, and what we're moving towards now is value generation over the longer term. So we need to not be communicating with stakeholders, but engaging with stakeholders. And that's what we're doing in Chapter 0 and the ESG Exchange. Thank you very much.